to the instructional video for Google Forms. We're going to start out by getting into our Google account. And to do that, we're going to make sure that we are signed into our Chrome browser right here and that we are on the home screen of www.google.com. In the very top right corner, if you haven't ever signed into your Google account before, we're going to click on that blue sign in button. And you're going to sign into your account using your aps.edu account credentials. Everyone at APS has a Google account, and that is the same username and password to get into your email. Once you have added your username and password, you're going to see an icon in the top right corner that says you are signed into your Google account. Next to your Google account, there is a waffle. We call it the waffle. It's actually called the Google Apps Launcher. If you click on that Google Apps Launcher, you will have access to all of the Google G Suite tools. So just like other Google tools, Google Forms can be created in a variety of different ways. The first way we're going to look at is through google.com and the Google Apps Launcher. Now, I am on the Google homepage and I've already signed into my Google account. And right next to my icon is going to be a waffle. We call it the waffle. It's actually called the Google Apps Launcher. And if I click on that, I'm going to find the Google Forms icon. When I click on that icon, it's going to take me to a page where I can see all of the different Google Forms that I've ever created. I can also use the template gallery to create a different variety of Google Forms that are already set up. And from the space, I can create a brand new blank Google Forms quiz or a blank Google form. We're going to talk about the difference between the two of those later in the training. So another way is if I go to a new tab and I just type in forms.google.com, I'm going to get right back to that same page that I was before. The last way to create a brand new Google form, and this is true for docs, sheets, slides, is you can automatically type into the URL, whatever you are creating, in this case it's forms.new, and it will create a brand new version of that Google tool. So right now it's just going to automatically create a brand new blank Google form. There's 3 different ways that you can create a Google form. I am in the Google Forms build page right now with a brand new form. Google Forms does have 2 different purposes. One way that you can use Google Forms is to collect data and information, like a data collection tool, and you can also use it to create self-grading quizzes. We are going to demonstrate how we're going to build a quiz, but you can also see how it can be used to create a survey or to gather data and information. This is my build page right here. Normally you would send off a link to other people in order to share a file in Google, but you don't want to send this link because this link is going to be the editable version of the form. Later on, we'll talk about how we can send this form out in the live version, but this is going to be the build space. So the very first thing I'm going to want to do is I'm going to name my Google form. Now we're going to create a quiz for reading. And when I name my form up here on the top, I can add a description right underneath it. And when I go up here in the top left corner, this is my file name. Now, if I create the name of my form first, and then I click on the file name, it will automatically update for me. Next to it, I can see what folder this form lives in, and I can add this also to my starred drive. Google Forms functions by questions. So we're going to be creating a different variety of questions. We're going to walk through all of the different question types. Now, the very first question style that Google Forms gives you when you first create a brand new form is a multiple choice question. If I click on the question right here, there's going to be a bunch of active menus that pop up. The active question that I am working on is going to be highlighted blue on the left right here, and I'm going to see all of the different interactive menus. Now, right here in this drop down is all of the different answer choices. We're going to look at multiple choice first. And over here is where I can add the question and answer options. So I'm going to add the question. And then right underneath that, I'm going to click where it says option 1. And I'm able to change that into my first answer choice. Underneath it, I'm going to click on Add Option again, and I'm going to keep on adding options until I'm happy with my answer choices. Now, if I would like, I can go to this button here and say Add Other, and that allows the person who takes the form to actually fill in their own option. I don't really want to add that right now, so if I don't like one of the answer options, I can go over to this X all the way to the right and remove that option. Down here on the bottom of the question, it allows me to duplicate this question. I can throw the entire question in the trash. I can make the question required. This means that the students or whoever is taking your form cannot submit the form unless this question's filled out. I'm going to actually turn that off right now. And then on the bottom right are 3 dots. That's my More menu. And with the multiple choice questions, I can add a further description. We're going to talk about going to a section based on answers later, but I can also shuffle the option order every time the Google form is relaunched. So I'm going to add a description, and underneath the question, I can add a little bit more information. So with a multiple choice question, it will allow only one response. So whoever takes the quiz will only be allowed to answer in one of these options. So now we're going to look at another different type of question style. I'm going to go over to that menu bar on the right and click on the plus icon again to add a question. And instead of a multiple choice question this time, I'm going to create a drop-down version. Now, I usually like to create a drop-down with student information. You can set up a quiz where it automatically collects emails, but I like to just sort of add an extra layer of protection by having the students select their names. So I'm going to click on the question and ask students to select their name below. And then I'm going to put some generic answers here, like student 1, and add a few of those options. So now I have a few options for students. Normally I would put student names. What you're going to notice about the drop-down version is it's going to look like a list, not necessarily a drop-down. That's because in the Google Forms build space, some of the tools and items are going to look a little bit differently in the build place than they are in a live form. So to look at an example of a live form, up on the very top bar, there is an eyeball looking icon, and that is the preview button. If I click on the preview button, a brand new Google form is going to open up here in a tab, and that is going to be the live version of the form. So here's that multiple choice question that we made. And then here is that drop down version now, looking a little bit different in the live build option. I'm going to go back to my build Google form. On the bottom, I still have those same icons as before to duplicate, trash, make this required, as well as description and shuffling the order. So I feel like the question where it asks for students' names should be the very first question that appears on my form. You can reorder the questions on the Google form. You go to the handle, that's the 6 dots right at the top of the question, and you click on it and drag the different questions in any order that you would like. So now I've reordered this. Now I am in the active question here, and I know that because there's the blue bar here on the side. If I were to create a brand new question right now, it would go underneath this question here. I don't want a brand new question there. I want it at the very bottom. So I'm going to click on this question now to make sure this is the active one. And I'm going to go over to the right and click Add Question again. And now we're going to talk about checkboxes. I'm going to select checkboxes as my option. And very similar to multiple choice, checkboxes are going to have different answer options. But instead of allowing just one answer response, there can be multiple answer responses. Like most digital assessments that are created, if there is a circle as an option, that usually means one choice. And if it is a checkbox or square, that means more than one answer. I'm going to add my question. And in the options, I'm going to allow more than one response. So I have 3 correct responses here that can be the possibility of the right answer. And in order to add that information, I'm going to go to those bottom 3 dots and add a description. And I'm going to let the students know how many answers they should select. So going up and looking at the live form, only select one answer. I can select multiple answers with checkboxes. We've just created the 3 main list styles of questions in Google Forms. There are some other different types of options that are called grid questions. I'm going to go over to the menu on the right and add another question. And this time I'm going to select multiple choice grid. The multiple choice grid question has a row that needs to be matched with an option that is in the column. I like to use the multiple choice grid for vocabulary options. Now, unlike most of the time when you put the word on the left and a definition on the right, I'm going to flip it around because rows can actually have more information or longer information than the columns can have on a Google form. So, my advice is if you are using this for vocabulary or something in that regard where you're going to have more information, I would put whatever options are longer in the rows and put whatever information is shorter in the columns. So, here on the question, I'm going to call this a vocabulary activity. And I'm going to add a definition here on row 1. And I'm going to add the word that matches that definition here in column 1. I'm going to continue this process until I have added all of my definitions and vocabulary words. Now, I do have these matched straight across, which I don't want to keep them in that order. So there are 2 different ways we can shuffle those up. Is I can individually go to each of the different options, and when I hover over on the very, very far left, I can reorder them manually this way and just drag them around. Or on the bottom right of the question, I can actually shuffle the row order every time that Google form is launched. Now, when I click off of this question, you can see that there are rows with the definitions and the words are here in columns, and the respondents will have to match those up. So similar to a multiple choice grid is a checkbox grid style. I'm going to add another question here from that menu bar on the right, and I'm going to create a checkbox grid. This checkbox grid allows more choices than just one option here, like the multiple choice grid. Because of the way that this is designed, my advice is to put the fewer options in rows, and you're going to put whatever items you want to match up the most here in the columns. So I'm going to go up here to question, and I'm going to put over here in the rows a particular type of story that I want to match up to genres here on the columns. And since I want to match up more than one genre, that's where I'm going to put more options here in the column side. So I've added my stories here in rows, and I'm going to add the genres here in columns. So similar to the multiple choice grid, I can go down here on the bottom right and shuffle the row order. Now when I click off of this question, I'm going to be able to see here that if I look at the Mother Goose story, I can select both rhymes or fables or fairy tales, depending on how I wanted to set that up. Now there are a couple of options in questions. I'm going to add another question here where respondents can actually use a drop down to add those responses. Those are the date and time options. So if I create a date, participants can go ahead and use a drop-down calendar to select a date. I would not suggest creating a date option for every time this is turned in, because when Google Forms is turned in by respondents, it will actually automatically create a timestamp on the response sheet. So you don't need to collect a date every time, but this is a great option if you're trying to collect a birth date or some sort of date in that regard. The other option is time, which is very similar. So I'm going to add that right now. And I'm going to select time. And that's going to create an interactive response as well. Now, since I'm in the build version, I can't really demonstrate how that works from the build space. So let's look at how our form is looking right now all together in the preview. I'm going to go back up to that eyeball button to preview. And you can see the drop-down style right here. This is my multiple choice version of an answer. I have the multiple options here in checkboxes. On the multiple choice grid, I'm able to have one response per row. And in the checkbox grid, I can have more than one response per row. Now here on the date option, I can either add in the date manually, or I can use this drop-down button and I can pick the date from a calendar. And here, same thing for time, is I can toggle between AM and PM, and then I can add the time here as an option. Google Forms also allows respondents to add a written response. There are two different versions for this, so I'm going to go here to add question one more time. And we are going to look at short answer first. Short answers are designed for short 1 or 2 sentence answers or responses. And I'm going to type in my question right here, and respondents can add their answer in the live form. Very similar to the short answer option is the paragraph option. This is for a longer response. Both of these question styles look very similar. If I go up to preview and I scroll down in the live form, respondents are able to type in their answers right here. There are a couple more options of questions, so let's go over and add a linear question. A linear question is more of an opinion sort of style question, where the respondents can choose on a scale of where they fall in a decision. So I'm going to say on a scale of 1 to 10, how well the students liked watching a Greek myth video. Now on the labels, I can label what 1 would be, and I can also label what the 10 would be. So we can add those options. Also in this style of question, you can right click in the written space and you can add an emoji or symbol for each of those options. So let's find a sort of sad picture and one where we're excited. Now, when I click off of this question, it will show what the active question is going to look like. And the 1 scale is going to be here on the far left, and the higher option is going to be here on the right. The last type of question that we're going to add here to our form is the ability to upload a file. So we're going to select File Upload. And when respondents upload a file, it will create a new folder in your drive to collect all of these uploads. Respondents are going to have to be required to sign into their Google account when they upload a file. So if you do have this style of question, it does make it a bit more difficult to embed it into a Google site or to use the embed code when you are using this style of form. So I'm going to go down to continue. And there are some options for setting up the file upload. I can allow only specific file types. If I toggle this on, I can select what type of file I want to be uploaded to be sent back to me. In this case, I want students to send me a Google Doc. I can have a number of files for them to submit. I can get up to 10. I'm going to show with 5. And I can figure out the maximum file size in order to save some space. Now, the form can accept up to 1 gigabyte of files. So I'm going to keep that at 10 megabytes. And I have completed a file upload question. If I go up to the preview now, and I scroll down to that upload question, we can see that there's going to be an Add File button, and that file can be pulled straight as an upload from Google Drive or from previously selected. Images can be added into Google Forms for different question styles. I'm going to go over to the Add Question button, and I'm going to add a short answer question again. Now, next to the question, I can see an icon that looks a little bit like a landscape picture frame. If I click on that button, it's going to allow me to add an image to this question. There are different ways you can add an image into a Google form. I can upload straight from the computer camera, by URL, from my Google Photos, from my Google Drive, and right from the space, I can actually search right on the web. I'm going to find an image of a mythological creature. I'm going to select that straight from the space and go to Insert. And now I can add a question about this image. When the image loads into the question, there is a More menu right here. I can do a few things with this image as far as alignment. I can align it to the left, center, or right. I can change the image or I can remove it, and I can even add a caption. Now, if I want to resize this image because I feel it's too big, I can just click on the image once, and I'm going to see these handlebars show up, and I can click on one of those and I can resize the image. And I'm going to realign it now. And I can add an image here in the actual question space. I can also add an image as answer options. So I'm going to create another question. And this is going to be a multiple choice question. And for my options, when I hover over the option, all the way over to the right, I'm going to see that image icon again. I can add an image for each of the different options. So I'm going to click on Add Option. And all the way over to the right, I'm going to click on that image button. I'm going to search right from Google. Now, when you are searching from Google, these are fair use images that are allowed to be used with copyright. Most of them are filtered for students. It is not absolutely perfect, so you need to realize that. But it works out pretty good for inserting straight from the web. And I can add the images this way. On the far right, I can actually add an overall image to the Google form itself. So here I can click on this image icon. This image will not be tied to any of the questions. So when I add information and add an image this way, it's going to add a large image here, and I'm able to add a title, and I have those same controls as before, but I don't have any question attached to it. Along with static images that are added to Google Forms, you can also add animated GIFs. So I can add a video right into Google Forms for students to watch. I had a question previously about how much the students had liked a video in a linear question style, and I actually want to add the video itself right into the Google form. So to do that, I'm going to go over to the right, and instead of adding a question, I'm going to go down to the icon that has a play button on it to add a video. When I click on that icon, I can search from YouTube right in the form itself. So I'm going to search for a video. Please be sure to watch and double check these videos before you add them into your Google form. They are partially filtered for the G Suite, but we just want to make sure that they are absolutely safe and good. I do know for sure this is the video that I want, and I'm going to click select, and that video is going to come up right into the space. I'm going to want to add a title, and I'm able to change the alignment and size of the video just like I had previously done when I added an image. Now, because this is the build space, I'm not able to watch that video from here. I'm going to have to go back up to the top and click on that preview button again. And I am able to see that video. I'm going to scroll down in the live form. So now students are able to watch that video and rate it right from the form. So right now, I'm fairly happy that in my Google form, I have used all of the different question styles, and I want to sort of break this form up a little bit, and I'm going to do that by using a title. So over here on the right, there is the option to add a title and a description. So I'm going to break up this form into two parts with the title feature for traditional literature and the other one for Greek mythology. So up here, because I want the title to go underneath this section, I'm going to click on it, make sure it's active, and click on that title button. And I'm going to label this one with traditional literature. And I'm going to go down to the part that Greek mythology begins. I'm going to click on the question above that and add another title to break this up. And this one I'm going to label as Greek mythology. So now when I go back up to preview and I look at the live form, it's going to be one long continuous form still with all of the questions. But I can see that there's a little break here where the titles are. Now, if you do have a form that is pretty long and you want to break it up even more so than just having those title sections, we're going to actually break this up into different page sections. So now instead of adding titles, we're going to add a section. I'm going to go underneath the selecting your name and I'm going to break this Google form into two separate sections. The first section is going to be traditional literature and the second section is going to be for Greek mythology. So over here on the right in that menu bar, the very last icon is the add section icon. When I add section, it's going to break this off where it's going to have sort of a gap in between the question and the next section. So here I'm going to call this the traditional literature unit, similar to what I did with the titles. And now I'm going to go back down to that other section. And I'm going to click on that section button once again. And I'm going to label this Greek mythology. Now, what makes a section different than a title is it's actually going to create a page for each one of those sections. So I'm going to go back up to the live form. And the only question that is going to be present right now is choosing your name. And since previously we had made that name a required question, it won't let me move on to the next section until I fill that out. So I'm going to select student 1. And this section is going to pull up the traditional literature section. And when I go on to the next section, that is going to be all of the questions that are sorted by Greek mythology. In Google Forms, you have the option to do something called branching, which means that you can go to a particular section based on an answer response. We're going to create one of those in this form. So right after the student name section, I'm going to add another question. That's going to be a multiple choice question, and I'm going to ask the respondents which section they would like to go to, either traditional literature or Greek mythology. Now that I've added those options, I'm going to go to the bottom right of this question, and I'm going to select the option that says go to section based on an answer. When I select that option, there's going to be a drop-down menu that appears next to each answer response. So if the respondent chooses traditional literature, I can have that go to section 2, traditional literature. And if they choose Greek mythology, I can choose to go to section 3. Now, underneath each section, there is the ability to choose where that section will go next. Since I want the respondent to be able to submit after taking the traditional unit section, I'm going to change that to submit form. Since the Greek mythology section is the last one already, students should be able to submit from the end of that section automatically. Now I'm going to go up to the live view. And since this was a required question, I'm still going to select the student option. And if I click on traditional literature and select next, I will be taken to that unit. And at the very bottom, I'll be able to submit that form. Now I'm going to go back to that very first page. And this time I'm going to choose Greek mythology instead of traditional literature. And this time I'm taken right to the Greek mythology section where I can submit that. This is a great way to provide some differentiation based on answer responses. This is also a great way to create sort of a choose your own adventure activity for students. And students also like to create these themselves, so sort of like a choose your own adventure narrative. Another feature that is available in Google Forms is something called response validation. Response validation doesn't allow the responder to move on to the next section unless they have met criteria in their response. So there are 3 types of questions that have response validation, and they can be used in some different ways. So I'm going to create a new question. And the first type of response we're going to look at is going to be the checkboxes. If I go to checkboxes, I can set up by using the bottom 3 dots, response validation. And when I select that option, they can select at most, at least, or exactly a specific number of answers. Since checkboxes allow more than one response, you can say that respondents have to choose exactly 3 options before they are allowed to go on to the next section. So I've just set this up with 4 options. And if I go to the live form, if I select 1 or 2 options, it won't let me move on to the next section unless I've chosen 3 options. The other question formats that have response validation is a paragraph style question. So in this paragraph style question, I'm going to select response validation again. And this time it's going to be based on the length of the response. So you can have a minimum character count or a maximum character count. So I've set up this question with asking for a paragraph answer with at least 100 characters. And here on the response validation menu, I'm going to choose minimum character count of 100. And I'm going to write a custom error message. Now I'm going to go over to the live form. And when I try and fill in that answer, it won't let me move on to the next section until I have met that minimum requirement for the answer. The last question style that allows response validation is a short answer. Now, short answer has a lot more options for response validation. You can base it off of a number, text, length of a response, or a regular expression. You can make the numbers be very specific. You can make the text be very specific and have either a URL or specific email address. And the length is very similar to the paragraph answer response. Now, this is a great way to create sort of a breakout or digital escape room sort of style Google form where students need to unlock the code or secret message before it moves them on to the next section. So if I say that they need to put in a secret code and that that number has to be equal to the specific code number, this is what the live form is going to look like. Students will need to enter the secret code here, and if they enter it incorrectly, it won't let them move on to the next section, but when they do it correctly, they can move on to the next section. Now I can further customize my Google form by adding a theme. To add a theme, I'm going to go up to the artist palette icon up on the top bar, and when I click on that, I'm able to add an image header. Now, if I change the theme color, that's going to change the overall title and headings and background of the Google form. Google has an AI that will pull off some of the image colors based on a header image. So if I click on choose image, I have two different options for a header. I can either choose one of the predetermined themes that Google already has, and there is a lot of different categories. And when I select one of these pictures and I choose that as my header, it's actually going to pull out the main colors of that image, and it's going to allow those to be some of my theme colors. Now, I can also use one of my own images if I choose, and Google will also pull the colors out of that image as well. So I'm going to choose an image, and this time instead of using a predetermined theme, I'm going to use one of the photos I have in Google Photos. So I'm going to pick this image here and select Done. And Google will pull out most of the colors of that image and pull those out to be optional theme colors. So I'm going to select a color for the theme color, and then I can change the background color as well as the font style for questions and titles. When I'm done, I'm going to click on the X on top, and that is now my theme for my form. Now, the way I've set up my Google form at the moment is more as a survey option. I can still send this form out right now, and I can get responses back where I can take those responses to collect data. This is a great way to do parent surveys, to get staff information, to create this as a behavior log or possibly like a bathroom pass, where you do not want to have grades automatically calculated for the Google form. Now, we can set this up as a self-grading quiz though. So to do that, we're going to go up to this icon in the top. This is the gear setting icon, and there are some options here for our Google form. So the first section of the settings is going to be the general section. You can choose to collect email addresses automatically for the Google form. This is great if you're trying to get staff information, and it will automatically pull those email addresses from the Google account. This button right here is very important if you are sending out a Google form as a survey for parents. Right now, the default of a Google form is to restrict to users in the APS domain. This means that if students are signed in, they'll be able to take the Google form, but if you send this to anybody else who isn't going to be able to sign in with an APS account, they won't have access to this form. So if you are sending this to parents, you're going to want to turn this option off. If I limit to one response, that is going to be tied to the APS account, which means that it will force respondents to sign into Google. So if you do send this to an outside group that is not restricted to APS, I would also turn that off. You can change this to where respondents can edit their answers after they submit, and where they can see a summary of all charts and text responses, and I can change the maximum size of my upload. I'm going to keep this all blank for the moment, and I'm going to go to the Presentation tab. I can show a progress bar based on how much progress has been completed for the form. I can shuffle the question order for all of the questions on the Google form. This will shuffle the section questions, but it won't shuffle the sections themselves. I can show a link to submit another response. This is great if you decide to use Google Forms for a rubric or for students to grade each other so they can continually submit the form over and over again. I can send a confirmation message when the form has been completed. This is also a great way to create sort of a breakout style Google form where students are going to get the next clue every time they fill out the previous form. I'm just going to put a generic confirmation message. And over here, the very last option is the quiz option. So there is the ability to toggle quiz off or on right here with this button. If I turn this option on, there's going to be some other options here on the bottom. I can turn on locked mode if I know that students are going to take this quiz using a Chromebook. If students are going to be using this in a flipped classroom or distance learning situation, I would not turn on locked mode if you're not sure what type of computers the students are going to be using. I'm going to go down to release grades immediately. So that way students can see their answers right away. And down here, I have the option for students to see what missed questions they had. It will give students the correct answers, and it will also give them point values. If at one time I want to send out a form, but I don't want it to be graded, I will click this off. If I keep this button clicked at the very end of the form, when students submit, it will ask students to view their score. If I turn this off, it will give students the option to view their accuracy. I'm going to keep that on for now, and I'm going to click Save. Now that I have set this up as a quiz, I'm going to have to add an answer key to this Google form. So the very first question is going to be students choosing their name. I don't want to have any points for this, and I don't want to add an answer to this question because it is a identifying question. If I scroll down to the very first question, I'm going to click on it, and I'm going to notice that on the bottom left there is an answer key. If I click on that answer key, it's going to open a new option that says choose correct answers, and I'm going to click on the correct answer, which is the second option, and it's going to put a green check mark. I'm also going to add points for each of the answers that I have chosen. When I am done adding the answer key and points, I'm going to click Done. I'm going to be put back into that question build space, but I'm going to see a check mark next to the answer key. I'm going to go down to all of these different questions, and I'm going to keep adding answers in my answer key. Now for the grid style answer key, I'm able to click on the options where they match up, and I am also able to add points to each of the different answers. For the answers that are short answer questions, when I create an answer key, I'm able to type in an answer right here to add a correct answer. I can also add other correct answers, possibly if I know students are going to spell something differently or if they can answer a question in a different way. I can also make it to where I can mark all other answers incorrect unless it is capitalized and spelled correctly. The long answer questions don't allow me to have the Google form automatically grade them. Occasionally, I will go ahead and create those in Google Classroom just as a separate assignment. So I'm going to delete this one for now. Now in the answer key, some of the questions allow me to provide answer feedback. For short answer and paragraph answer and linear questions, when I click on Add Answer Feedback, I'm able to add a link or a YouTube video after students have submitted their answers. For other style questions, such as the multiple choice answers and checkboxes, when I click on Add Answer Feedback, I'm actually able to send students to a different area based on correct or incorrect answers. So if students have correct answers, I can provide them feedback, which can also be a link or YouTube video. And for incorrect answers, I can have students be sent to a different location with a link or have them directly watch a YouTube video right from the answer sheet. So in this case, I'm going to add a YouTube video. If the student gets this question incorrect, and I'm going to select that and click Save. And now I've created answer feedback. This is how you create the answer key in a Google Forms quiz. So now that we have created this as a quiz, let's see what that's going to look like from a student's point of view when they take it. Now, since I want to collect data on both of these sections, I'm going to go ahead and take off this section that is a branching question, and I'm going to keep it as one solid form. I'm going to go up to that preview button again. And when I do that, I'm actually able to interact with this as if it were a live form. So I'm going to go through and take the quiz as if I were a student. And I'm going to select all of the different answers. When I get down to the last question, I'm going to be able to click on the Add File button, and it's going to give me some options to upload. And I'm going to go straight to my drive and click on the document I want to upload, and it's going to be right there. And I'm going to click Submit. When I am done submitting, Google Forms automatically tallied up all of the total points for my form, and I'm able to go in as a student and view my score right away. I can see the total points are 14 out of 16, and I can see on each section how many points I got for each one. Now I can look and see which answers were incorrect. And if you remember, we set up this question that if I have an incorrect answer, it's automatically going to give me some feedback. And in this case, I'm able to watch this video right from the Google form as feedback. I can go down and see the other questions and if I got them correct or incorrect. Now let's look at the responses that have been turned in for this Google form. I'm going to click on the top to the Responses tab. I can see an overall summary of all of the entries, and I can scroll down and look at a chart or a graph for each individual question. So when I go down, I can see the first question, which was choosing your name. And then for each of the different responses, there's a little bit different graph or chart that is available in the summary. For the multiple choice question, I can see the one answer and the other answers that were provided. I can see in the checkbox format the 3 different answers and the answer key are in green. And for the multiple choice grid and the checkbox grid, I can toggle between the row options on the bottom and see the responses for each row. That is the same for the multiple choice grid as well. For the short answer question, I can see the short answer that was correct, but I can also see what other answers students put into that question. For the linear scale, I can see a bar graph of all of the different responses. And for the uploaded question, I can see all of the different files that were uploaded and turned in. I can click on them to access them this way, or I can go to the folder that was created, and I will see all of the responses as a copy that has been uploaded to this folder. If I go back up to the Responses tab and click on Question, I can see the individual questions and all of the different responses for that particular question. I can toggle between the questions with the drop-down, as well as using these arrows. The last option to look at the data in the Responses tab is on the Individual. And in the Individual view, I can scroll down and see which student turned in this particular Google form, and I can go through this and see all of the answers for that individual student. I can toggle between the students on the top using these arrows, and I can look at the next response. Here's for student 2. And I can toggle between all of the students this way. There is one other way to see student response answers, and that is by creating a spreadsheet. Up in the top right corner, I can click on the spreadsheet icon, and it will create a new spreadsheet for this Google form. I'm going to click on Create, and a spreadsheet will automatically be created for this Google form. The Google spreadsheet will automatically have a timestamp for when that Google form was turned in. I can see the overall score and all of the different responses from the students from my classroom. When I go over to the column, I can click on it and I can sort the entire sheet by different information. That Google Sheet will be in the same folder that the Google form was created in. Next to the Google Sheet icon, there is going to be 3 dots for the response settings. I can set up email notifications every time there is a new response and every time a new Google form is submitted. I can select a response destination, which is a new Google Sheet. Unlinking the form will unlink the form from the Google spreadsheet. It is advised not to do that unless you have to. I can print all responses, and I can also delete all of the responses. If I no longer want to accept any responses from students, I can toggle this off, and the live form will no longer be available. I'm going to keep that on. You can change some default settings for Google Forms by going to the More menu in the top right corner with the 3 dots and then selecting Preferences. In Preferences, you can choose to collect email addresses every time you make a brand new Google form. You can also change the preferences for when you create a Google Forms quiz. You can make every single question required, and you can change the default quiz point value to a specific number for every future form that is created. So now that we've created some Google Forms, let's look at how Google Forms function inside of a Google Classroom. I am going to go over here to one of my Google Classrooms, and I'm going to select Classwork. Google Forms work automatically as quiz assignments inside a Google Classroom. So when I go to the Create button here in my Classwork tab, and I create a quiz assignment, it's automatically going to create a blank Google form that is set up in quiz mode. Now, right from the Google Classroom assignment, I can turn on locked mode for Chromebooks, and I want to make sure that I have turned on grade importing. So this way the grades from the Google form are automatically inputted into my Google Classroom gradebook. We're going to start off looking at the example of a blank quiz built inside a Google Classroom, and then we're going to show about importing an already made Google form. So I'm going to click on this blank quiz, and I'm going to add some information to it, and then I'm going to create the assignment. Now I've used that import question option to add these questions, and I'm going to go back to the assignment, and I'm going to click Assign. Now I'm going to go over to the Google Classroom from a student's point of view, and we're going to look at that quiz assignment. And here it is. And when I go to view the assignment, as a student, I can click on this Google form right here, and I can complete the form. I do like having some name characteristics, and I'll show you why in a little bit. So we're just going to go ahead and add some answers here as a student. And I'm going to submit this. Now, I could be sent a copy of my responses, but since we don't have Gmail turned on, we're not going to use that right now. And as a student, I have another option here when it's built through Google Classroom. I can view my score automatically and see how I did right away from another tab. I'm going to go back to that previous tab, but I can go ahead and open my assignment automatically. Now, in Google Classroom, students are required to turn in their assignments, but since this is all built together and it's all in the same system, once I go back to that screen, it's going to show that I've already turned in that assignment once I submit that Google form. And we're going to see that assignment from a teacher point of view. I'm going to click on that assignment in Google Classroom, and I'm going to go to View Assignment. Now, I can see the students that this has been assigned to, and I can see the student who has turned in this assignment. Now, a little bit different with Google Forms in Google Classroom is normally I can click on the student themselves, and I can see their work. It doesn't work this way in Google Classroom. What's going to happen is you're going to click on that Google form right here, and it's going to take you to a live form. That is the form that is actually sent to students, which isn't going to give you those responses either. So on the very bottom right corner is an edit button. When I click on that edit button, because I am the owner of that form and I created it, it's going to take me back to that built form, and I can see the responses. So now I can click on responses. and I can go to individual, and I can see each individual and their answers in the Google form. Now, I do like having the characteristic of selecting their name just to have an extra layer of protection. But up here on the top is where Google Forms is automatically going to add and input that student information into Google Classroom. Now, in Google Classroom, I can still create a spreadsheet of student answers right here where it says Create Spreadsheet. And I'm going to create that. And it's going to create that spreadsheet for me. Now, one of the things is that teachers sometimes get confused where the form and this response sheet are actually housed. So I'm going to go back to my Google Classroom right here, and I'm going to go back to that classwork page up here. When you create a Google Classroom, it automatically creates a class drive folder in your drive. So I'm going to click on that drive folder. And in the main folder of that Google Classroom is where that blank quiz and the responses are going to be housed. So this is if you create a quiz inside Google Classroom. Now let's go and see how we create a quiz that is actually imported or assigned from your drive. I'm back in my Google Classroom in my classwork tab, and I'm going to click on the Create button and create a quiz assignment again. Except this time, instead of using the blank quiz that was automatically created, I'm going to delete that option, and I'm going to add my own quiz from Google Drive. I'm going to add the quiz that we've been building, and I'm going to click Add. And here is that quiz. I am going to keep on grade importing, so that way the grades from the Google quiz are going to be pulled into my gradebook. Now, I've already taken the quiz as a student, and so back here in the teacher classroom, I'm going to view the assignment. And up here in this corner, I can import the grades from the actual Google form. I'm going to select Import, and I'm going to see that those points changed right here. So they're actually being pulled out of that Google form itself. So when I go over to my gradebook in Google Classroom, it's automatically going to show that Google form, and then it's going to show all of the imported grades from the Google form that students have taken. Now, where this Google form is different than where the Google form is that is automatically built in Google Classroom. This Google form, so I'm going to click on it. Similar to the one previously, I can go to the Edit button, and I'm going to see that build form right here. And I go up here in the top, I can see what folder that this form lives in. This form is still in my drive. It will not be kept in that Google Classroom folder. It's going to stay in whatever location you originally created it. So since I originally created this quiz in my drive, the quiz is still here, and the response sheet will be right next to it in the same folder or location. So I'm able to click on that response sheet. And if I scroll over to the side, I can see all of the attachments that were uploaded with that form. Now with Google Forms, when you do create a quiz assignment in a Google Classroom, you do need to be careful with adding a bunch of attachments or adding extra things to that quiz assignment, because sometimes it doesn't allow those grades to be imported correctly. So my advice is to create one assignment just with that quiz form and create a separate assignment with other attachments. Now that we've created a Google form, let's look at ways Google Forms can be used. One of the ways that Google Forms can be used is to gather information or to take surveys. In this case, this has been a survey our department created to get information about Google education tools. We can look very quickly at the responses and make decisions based off of those responses. Another way that Google Forms can be used is with parents. This is a Meet the Teacher parent form, and parents can fill out this information for their child, and it will collect all of the information you would want at the beginning of the year. including contact information, volunteer information, and parent permissions, as well as an interest survey. This can also be broken up by smaller permissions, such as movie permissions, or to gather survey information from parents. Another way Google Forms can be used is as a classroom management tool. This is a bathroom pass where students can choose their name and location for where they're going to the bathroom, and it can collect all of this information in that response sheet, and you can determine how often students are going and how much instructional time is being missed. This is a Google form that has been set up as a quiz, but it has used animated GIFs where you can actually watch them, and students can determine whether that is a physical or chemical change. The next version is for a self-paced and self-grading spelling test. Students choose their names, and then they can listen to the word being said in a sentence, also with a visual right in the Google form itself. Bridge. I will need to cross the bridge to get to the other side. Students can then type in the word right underneath the video. At the end of the form, students will be able to see which words they spelled correctly and which ones they spelled incorrectly, and that can be imported into Google Classroom. Certain spelling lists can also be created for different groups of students in the classroom, differentiating each spelling unit. Another way that students can use Google Forms is with a breakout style activity. This is a breakout that is designed for a classroom where students can go around looking for envelopes and clues. And then once they add in the clue, it will lead them to the next envelope until they reach the end. This is a Google form that has been set up as an exit ticket. So students just need to quickly answer one of the answers. And if they get the answer correctly, they can move on. And if they get the answer incorrectly, it will actually take the students to a personalized lesson and review for that particular question. This is a Google form that has been set up as a reading log. The students can add their name and then type in the title, author, genre, and number of pages that were read, and it will be kept in their own personalized response sheet. This Google form has been set up as a rubric where students can grade each other on a presentation. The form has been set up to submit another response, so students can continually submit responses for each different presentation. This is another rubric that is built in a similar way. This is a great way to build rubrics together with students to determine the criteria and range, and students can have input in that design, and then they can use it with each other as well. Students can also create their own Google Forms to create narrative stories or even nonfiction stories. In this case, this was a Google form that is set up as a trip to write about your favorite trip. And students can click on any of these areas, and using the branching technique, it will take students to that particular page. And then those pages further branch out to take students to a different part of a story. This Google form is set up as a behavior form. So if students have misbehaved in class, they can go to a computer or an iPad, pick their name, describe their behavior, discuss what they were thinking at the time and how they would have done something differently. When this data is saved, it can be pulled from the response sheet, filtered by that particular student, and kept as a behavior log for that student.